Today's video is going to be on the bestest, most famous, most fan-favoritist, most popular, most spectacular, most high-selling, most wonderful, most gracious, most ever-loving character of all time from Marvel Comics. Kamala Khan, Miss Marvel. A character with a massive fan base, with TV shows, cartoon, video game appearances, countless comics. A character that has really made her mark in terms of the culture. A character that everyone is just clamoring for more of. A character that might even be a part of the new X-Men lineup very, very soon. Not just in the comics, but in the movies as well. I mean, they're doing a new series coming out very soon, retconning Kamala Khan into iconic X-Men events, which I think is what everybody from comic books has been clamoring for, because of course, Miss Marvel Kamala Khan is the most popular, most famous, most incredible, most lovely, most amazing, awesome characters of... I can't do this anymore, you guys. I can't do this anymore. I can't let it slide anymore. There is a character from Marvel Comics called Kamala Khan, aka Miss Marvel. And like I said, she's gotten her own TV show, her movie appearances, and might start appearing in even more stuff. But there is a lie around this character, a lie that has perpetuated far too long and that someone sooner or later had to do a video debunking this lie. The lie that Kamala Khan, Miss Marvel, is this most popular, beloved character that everyone is just clamoring for more of, and that therefore it justifies her being pushed in all of this stuff, and that her push is entirely organic and that she is not at all an industry plant. No! Kamala Khan, Miss Marvel, is the original Marvel Comics industry plant. MCU fans complain about characters like Captain Carter or Luna Snow being given artificial pushes in Marvel media, but like, if you're gonna complain about those characters, then you need to be complaining about Kamala Khan as well. This character does not have the fan base behind her. She has never had the sales behind her, yet more than any other character, she has been artificially pushed and shoehorned into everything, and I wouldn't let it bother me. However, it is now threatening characters that I actually like, the X-Men, and might threaten the upcoming movies as well. The relentless push of this character that was never popular in the first place, because I'm constantly hearing people like from MCU fans talking about how Kamala Khan is just so popular, but I'm never actually seeing fans of Kamala Khan or this big fan base that they say exists. I'm sure that there are 1 or 2 or 5 people out there that like this character. There's always someone. But does this character really have the fan base around her to justify this much of a continued push, to where all of the Marvel Universe was mourning her in the Spider-Man comic where she was killed off, to becoming the first mutant in the MCU?
Kamala, there's something different in your genes, like a mutation.
Does Kamala Khan really deserve all of this, and does she really have the fan base behind her? No, and I'm going to prove to you why. And once again, if you like the character, fine. I don't expect to find that many people out there that do, but what I'm doing in this video is I just want to tell the truth about her. I want there to stop being these lies that this is actually the most popular character ever. But as we get into that, we need to get into the origins, because that is going to be important into understanding why the character of Kamala Khan has been pushed so relentlessly so much. Kamala Khan got her first comic in February 2014, and she was created in part by then Chief Marvel editor Sana Amanat. Now, this is important into why Kamala Khan has been so pushed since her inception, that Kamala Khan, she was really Sana Amanat's baby. Apparently, Kamala Khan was created when Sana Amanat was making some jokes about her upbringing as a Muslim American, and that created the idea for this new character. So Kamala Khan was heavily inspired by the childhood of the Marvel editor-in-chief at the time. This was a pet project for her. This was a very important character to her. Kamala Khan was advertised when she first came out as the very first Muslim American superhero from Marvel Comics. Even though that wasn't true, there were actually 3 characters at least recorded by Wikipedia that were Muslim superheroes in Marvel Comics before. But saying that Kamala Khan is our first Muslim superhero, as opposed to saying this is the first Muslim superhero we decided to give a spotlight to, sounds a lot better, so they went with the former. But anyway, Kamala Khan was, I remember, being advertised like she was the second coming into comics. I remember because that was the same year I got into comics. Kamala Khan just had so much hype around around her. And I went and looked up what her first comic actually sold. And keep in mind, #1 issues of comics tend to be highly inflated due to variant covers, hype, telling people that this is a big jumping on point, a lot of advertising, and of course, collectors coming in and trying to pick up the issues. The #1 issue for any comic tends to be very inflated from what it normally is going to get going forward. But I looked up what the actual sales of Kamala Khan's first issue were, and it was only 50,000. Really? Wow. My expectations were low, but even I thought at least 80,000, given how much hype this character was getting and how much of a push she was getting and how much hype since then she's gotten. Only 50,000 issues. To put that in perspective, a couple of years later in August 2016, Harley Quinn's relaunch got almost 400,000 issues sold. While I am talking about exceptional sales here, that's how high a #1 issue can get. Miss Marvel, only 50,000. And yeah, this was a brand new character, and I wouldn't expect a brand new character to get the same amount of sales as an A-list character from comics, but this was also a character just being overhyped to death, like she was the second coming or something. It's kind of surprising to me that her initial sales were only that high. Now, I happen to be given a trade paperback of Miss Marvel, Kamala Khan, at the time that this was coming out. And this was one of the first trade paperbacks of comics that I read. And it was fine. Like, just fine. I mean, it wasn't great. At the same time, I didn't hate it. It took me a while to really figure out like what my feeling about this comic was. And over time, I was able to explain to myself why I really wasn't digging this comic. The problem with Kamala Khan is that she was an amalgamation of different cliches, different teen drama cliches and different superhero teen cliches. She's a teenager who wants freedom from her more conservative parents. She wants to go to parties and all of that kind of stuff. She struggles balancing out her normal life with her superhero life. Something that we'd already seen done a lot better with Peter Parker, Spider-Man, and so many other superhero characters. That was my real problem with Miss Marvel. Not that she was bad, it's just that she was a bunch of cliches and stereotypes all together. There was nothing about her that was really standing out. I mean, except for this one element. Now, what seemed to be the big selling element about Kamala Khan, Miss Marvel, was that she was a fangirl of other heroes. That was what really was a push since the beginning. She writes fan fiction about heroes. Captain Marvel is her favorite superhero, which is why she modeled her persona off of her. This has been a high push from the beginning, and I think it was supposed to try to make Miss Marvel a self-insert for the audience. Like, she's a big fan of these characters just like you. But to me, and I'll get into this more in a bit, that never really enticed me about her. Like, it doesn't give you much depth or character if the biggest, most iconic thing about you is that you're a fan of other characters. I'll just leave it at that for now. But there were other elements about Miss Marvel that I just didn't really dig. Like, her outfit was very, very meh. This was in the era where they were really looking at the costumes of female superheroes and trying to make them more cosplayable because they figured girls really like cosplay. And what they would forget is in order to make people want to cosplay stuff, you have to make it look good. These costumes here, like Burnside Batgirl or Miss Marvel, which as you see is just a tunic and red tights, they might be easy to cosplay. They also don't look that great. And so ultimately, these outfits did not become cosplay sensations as they had intended to. But yeah, her outfit was really bland. But the most negative thing I could say about the character was her power set. And I usually do not have any problem with a character's power set. I usually don't put that much thought into it, but Miss Marvel's original power set is so bad, it's one that I have to say something about. Miss Marvel's power set was so bad that they actually retconned it when they brought her into the MCU. Her original power set was she could embiggen or shrinken parts of herself. Yes. So, in other words, Miss Marvel could stay normal for the rest of her body, but make her hand, her fist, be really big. Or she could make herself become real giant, or she could make herself real small, or she could make a part of herself really small and the rest of it stay normal, or get giant, and all of that. It was called embiggening according to the comics, and that is a terrible power set. First of all, no teenager has ever woken up and thought, you know, what I really want to do is I really wish that I could make my hand, just my hand, really big and the rest of my body stay the same. I wish I could make my feet really big and the rest of my body stay the same. No one wants that. It's like Mr. Fantastic, but not cool and not flattering at all. No woman, no teenager, no man would like to have that power set. It's really awful. And it didn't really fit with the Miss Marvel moniker. All of the monikers related to Captain Marvel had always been flight and light based, which is what they eventually retconned Miss Marvel's powers to be in the MCU version, at least. The embiggening thing was really embarrassing, unflattering, uncool, and it did not fit with this line of characters. So that was my biggest criticism against Miss Marvel, is she had a terrible power set, and I don't understand the people who created it at all. So that was Miss Marvel. She really wasn't that great a character, but after her initial launch, how did her sales actually do? I looked it up, and typically Miss Marvel's first series, she was selling between the lower 30Ks, and one time she dipped into the 20Ks. Now, for those who don't know comic book sales, there's going to be a lot of debate over this because the margin for success and failure in comics ever since the 2010s, and it's become a very small industry, is really narrow. But I remember back then it was said that 20Ks was when books tended to be on the chopping block. Now, these days, the margin for being on the chopping block has become even lower than that. 20Ks would be seen a lot better for a comic selling, but back then, 20Ks was considered when, as a book, you're typically on the chopping block. So Miss Marvel at one point dipped into the 20Ks at her launch, but was typically selling in the 30Ks in her first series. That's honestly not bad, all things considered. This was a character that was getting a massive push from Marvel, but nonetheless, it was a brand new character who was based off of the moniker of a character who had been C-list up to this point. So honestly, Miss Marvel selling generally in the lower 30Ks being a brand new character, I would say that's decent, all things considered. It's just that in the future, she would have to prove that she had staying power. But I want to also emphasize that was by no means a runaway success. That is all right, considering that this was a brand new character. But this was by no means a runaway hit. This was by no means a smash success. It wasn't a flop either. It just means that out the gate, with all the hype and push this character was getting, there were some people who were staying with the book for her initial run. But Miss Marvel's initial run was not to last long, because a little over a year later, Marvel Comics was planning to relaunch everything, and Miss Marvel was one of those comics that got relaunched. So she was relaunched. This relaunch got a lot more sales. It got 79K in terms of her number one. But once again, number one sales tend to be very inflated, and what you would see next in the coming months is that Miss Marvel's sales from her relaunch dropped and dropped and dropped, and they got even worse than she was selling before. It wasn't long before Miss Marvel was selling just in the 20Ks, like what I was saying tends to be the chopping block for books. But shortly after that, it got even worse. Miss Marvel went from typically selling in the 20Ks when books are usually canceled or considered for cancellation to selling in the 10,000 range. And that is where she stayed. And ever since then, Miss Marvel, whatever book she's been put in, whether it's a relaunch of her own series or a mini-series or any of the books they put her in, has not sold at all. Seriously. Miss Marvel would go on to be relaunched 3 times in the next 5 years, meaning that her book wasn't selling, so they would cancel it and relaunch it, hoping to get all those sales from the number one issue and that relevancy again, only to have it crater again after that. But despite her solo book not selling at all and only selling okay in the very, very beginning, they would not stop pushing her and stuff. She was made into a pivotal part of the Civil War II event, having a falling out with Captain Marvel. She was put on team books like Secret Warriors that was canceled just after 12 issues. She was made a leader of the Champions, which was a team book that was canceled at 10 issues. She was headlining a Marvel Team Ups relaunch, which was canceled at just 6 issues. Miss Marvel was continuously pushed as this flagship character in everything. So many series where she was either the lead or a pivotal part of, and none of them worked, but they just would not stop pushing her and stuff. And even as her sales just were not working in comics and people weren't sticking with her, they started to put her in stuff like the cartoons and video games. She started to have a ton of appearances, kind of as an audience surrogate in those awful, I just gotta say it, Marvel cartoons that they used to play on Disney XD. She would eventually go on to be added to the EA Avengers game as a character, despite her not having any of the sales or the fan base to show for it. Now, why was Miss Marvel being pushed in so much stuff relentlessly? Character has to do more than just have okay sales when they start. They have to prove that they have staying power, and Miss Marvel was not proving that. But this idea perpetuated that she was this fan favorite character because that's how they would talk about her in interviews and things. In all interviews, they kept talking about Miss Marvel as this fantastic character, and people kept seeing her printed on the cover of so many things and put into so many things. They assumed she had to have the fan base behind her in order to support that, but that's just not true. And this is what's happened with a lot of characters from comics, like Carol Danvers. Her series as Captain Marvel had to relaunch 6 times ever since she became Captain Marvel because they just couldn't sell it. Harley Quinn, while she was very popular, provably with sales in the 2010s, hasn't sold in a very long time, but a lot of people don't realize that because she's been pushed in so many things. Like, this is just an artificial push from companies that want you to think that a character is popular because they want to keep them relevant by pushing them in so much stuff, and they're just hoping that you're not actually going to look at the sales behind the scenes. So the question is, why was Miss Marvel continued to be given this artificial push? Well, I think that there was never a question on will Miss Marvel be popular. I think there was always that Miss Marvel has to be popular. Because remember, Miss Marvel was Sana Amanat's baby. She was a character who was based off of her own experiences. She was pushed as, once again, kind of the second coming in comics, the push into this modern era. They wanted her to be one of the faces of comics because she was so important to Sana Amanat. She was the face of the new era of Marvel. A lot of people also speculate that perhaps Sana Amanat just wanted to continue to get royalties from this character that she helped co-create, and that's why she continued to be pushed in so many things. But there's another reason, I think, why Miss Marvel just continued to be pushed so much. The intention from the beginning was always to put Miss Marvel into the MCU. And if you don't think that that's true, well, that's what happened with all the other characters they came out with at this time. Riri Williams, Jane Foster Thor, none of these characters had good sales, but they eventually made their way into the MCU. That's because that was always the intention all along. Ever since Disney took over Marvel, Marvel Comics became very much an advertising ground to plant ideas to later justify doing them in the MCU because they would have happened in the comics first. And you can tell that that was an intention behind Miss Marvel because she was made an Inhuman initially. Why? Because at the time, 2014, Disney did not have the rights to the X-Men or mutants at the time. If they did, then she probably would have been a mutant to start with. So even them making Miss Marvel specifically an Inhuman, she thought she was a mutant in the beginning, but found out she was an Inhuman, was them planting the seeds for her to eventually be put in the MCU. Well, Miss Marvel came out in her own Disney Plus TV series, and this was like the pinnacle. This was what this character was supposed to get all along. She was intended to be a part of the MCU. The show came out and got rave reviews. Of course it would, because it's Miss Marvel. You can't ever say anything bad about Miss Marvel, but the show became the lowest watched Disney Plus show out of Marvel, which is saying something because none of the other shows were getting high viewership either. But the least viewed show at the time for Disney Plus from the MCU was Miss Marvel. And why? Because Miss Marvel never had the fan base they said she did. She never sold well in the comics. She never had a big fan base around her. So when her TV show finally came out, no one really wanted to watch her. And I watched some of the TV show, and like the comics, I couldn't really get into it. I've noticed that more and more as Miss Marvel went on as a character, she started to become more and more solely defined by the fact that she's a fan of other heroes, and that's what defines her in Miss Marvel and what defines her in the video games and a lot of the cartoons. She's the character who's a fan of other superheroes. But once again, that doesn't give her much character. Being a fan of something else and having no depth even behind that fandom does not make you a very interesting character in your own right. She's supposed to kind of be a self-insert for the audience, but she's not actually an interesting character that you'd want to be. The rest of the Miss Marvel TV show was very much just Kamala finding out her history. It felt kind of like a Disney Plus after school special for a lot of it, just with what I watched. It wasn't very enticing, just like Miss Marvel. Not a hateable character, but just not a very interesting one. But with this series came another big change. Remember, Miss Marvel was originally created to be an Inhuman, and the reason why was because they were trying to use the Inhumans as a replacement for mutants and X-Men when Disney did not have the rights to characters. But what they were going to do with the Inhumans fell apart. It kind of fell apart with the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. show using up too many of those ideas, but it especially fell apart when the movie that they were going to make for Inhumans became a TV show, and that TV show, when Marvel was in its prime, was such a massive flop. It was a huge embarrassment, this Inhumans TV show. And it apparently embarrassed Kevin Feige so much that he created an event in comics called Death of the Inhumans, while all the Inhumans were killed off. And to this day, we still haven't seen them since because Kevin Feige hates the Inhumans. But they were never going to kill off the Golden Girl, Miss Marvel, Kamala Khan, this character who can do no wrong, who despite no one actually liking that much and never actually getting that much sales, must be in everything. So what were they going to do with Kamala Khan? They were going to retcon her to what she probably would have been in the first place, a mutant. And this is where it gets crazy. Kamala Khan, this character who could no longer carry her own series, and by the way, she hasn't had her own solo series in years because she could not for the life of her get it to sell. There was a story orchestrated in, of all things, the pages of Amazing Spider-Man, where Kamala Khan sacrifices herself and dies, and it's treated as this really tragic moment in a Spider-Man comic. Why? Why in a Spider-Man comic? Like, I ultimately didn't pay attention to all of Miss Marvel's stuff because I thought the character was boring, but I don't remember there being any story where she was made out to have a special connection to Peter Parker or even knowing any of his supporting cast. Why is her death in a Spider-Man comic where all of the characters are mourning over her in the Spider-Man comic? Well, it's because Spider-Man was the top-selling series, and if they had done this anywhere else, no one would have cared. If they had a Miss Marvel comic where she died, no one would have cared because no one was reading her comics. The only way to get people's attention on this event was to put it in Spider-Man, and it ended up getting attention for the wrong reasons because Spider-Man fans were shocked at this disruption, and the 5 Kamala Khan fans out there were wondering exactly why this happened in something other than a Miss Marvel comic. It's because not a lot of people were reading a Miss Marvel comic. She couldn't even carry a series anymore. But the death of Miss Marvel was just used as an excuse to resurrect her on Krakoa, which is where the X-Men were living at the time, and reveal that actually she's been a mutant all this time and retcon her into being a mutant. And this all ties back into the MCU, where now she could officially be the first mutant in the MCU. Which makes no sense because in the comic she had been an Inhuman for the better part of 10 years. And Miss Marvel as a character, she's a very goofy, happy-go-lucky character, very lighthearted, very younger skewing. She doesn't really fit with the mutant, hated and feared by everyone vibe that the X-Men and mutants go for. So to me, it's very odd for this character of all things to be a mutant at all, or let alone the first mutant in things. But how has Miss Marvel's run as a mutant gone in comics? Well, she still can't support her own series, and they haven't been trying to. They gave her a 4-issue miniseries to make her a mutant, but they haven't attempted to give her another solo series yet, because once again, she just couldn't sell. I mean, she was in the Marvels movie, which was her big screen debut, but that movie was also the biggest bomb in MCU history, at least in the modern day MCU. And her most recent series, because she can't carry a book on her own, was another team-up book called NYX. That was literally just announced as being canceled and one of the first comic series in Marvel's new X-Men relaunch to be canceled as of this recording. Because Miss Marvel, even when she's put in low expectation team-up books where she doesn't have to carry the thing by herself, cannot sell a comic book. And she hasn't been able to sell even as they've retconned her into being a mutant, and she really doesn't work that way. She doesn't fit with the rest of the characters. However, and this is the entire impetus of this video being made, even with just constant cancellations and failures and no one actually liking this character, she's still being pushed relentlessly. Recently, it was just announced that they are doing a big event over this summer commemorating Giant Size X-Men. For those who don't know, Giant Size X-Men is one of the most, if not the most, iconic issues of X-Men history, where Wolverine joined the team, Storm, Nightcrawler, Colossus, and Magic were first introduced. It was basically when Chris Claremont took over the series and made it into what it is today. After X-Men was a failed book, he took over, he made the mutant metaphor and allegory for civil rights and all of that, and he introduced all these new characters and new people to the team, and once again, he made them what they are. Giant Size X-Men is that famous, and they're doing a 50-year anniversary. And they're commemorating that with a series of one-shots that were advertised as reimaginings of famous events like Giant Size X-Men, House of M, Age of Apocalypse. And what is the big interesting reimagining for these books? That Kamala Khan was there all along. Kamala Khan was there in Giant Size X-Men, along with the official famous team that was there. Kamala Khan was there in House of M, fighting Magneto. Wow, how riveting. Just what I always wanted for these revisits of iconic events. Hey guys, haven't you ever just wanted this self-insert character that's an industry plant that was never successful, that no one actually liked, that can't sell to save her life? In fact, she seems like sales poison to comics at this point. Haven't you ever wondered what it would be like if she was retconned into famous comic book events? No. This is not only a horrible idea and shows that they just will not stop with this character no matter how low she sells, but it also creates a fear because they say, and this could just be gobbledygook advertising, but they keep teasing that this series is going to change some of the history of the X-Men completely. And this is the fear that people have, and what makes me scared is that they're going to now retcon it so that Miss Marvel, this character who's never been on the X-Men and who was retconned into being a mutant just recently, that she was there from the beginning, all the way back to a book like Giant Size X-Men that came out in the 70s, that she has been a part of the X-Men and a part of mutant history all this time. And the reason that they would do that is to justify her place on the X-Men team as one of the earliest additions so that they could then justify her appearance on the team in the X-Men movies. And don't say that it won't happen, because all comic books have been, like, Tony Stark is Doctor Doom, Riri Williams, all these characters in comics, Carol Danvers, Captain Marvel, they're all there just to justify storylines and decisions that are going to be made in the movies coming forward. And there's already been rumors floating around that Miss Marvel might be one of the characters on the first X-Men roster. And no. Don't let that happen. Don't let that happen. You already have your young teenage heroes who appear on the X-Men who are audience surrogates. You have Kitty Pryde or Jubilee, or both of them if you want to use them at once for an X-Men team. The X-Men, when they eventually come out, which I hope will be a while now with how Marvel has gone, they need to choose their top members. People who people haven't even seen yet. Kitty Pryde, I don't agree with Ellen Page version. She's never been done right on the big screen. Jubilee has not gotten any screen time, really. They've cast her 3 times and never given her any screen time. You want to get your roster up with fan favorite X-Men characters that have earned their popularity, that people actually want to see them have screen time in X-Men movies. Not this self-insert industry plant character that has been forced down people's throats for the last 11 years that no one likes, has nothing to show for her popularity, has nothing to show for sales, has become sales poison in comics, and you're trying to retcon her into everything, even after just every book she's a part of fails. Even her last book that was supposed to be a part of X-Men failed. She's not popular. I'm tired of seeing lies around that she's popular. I'm tired of having her forced into everything when she's a character that really needs to go away at this point. Now, there's 2 theories as to why Miss Marvel is being pushed into everything still. The first theory is that even as Sana Amanat has left Marvel, that she still wants royalties from this character and she still has influence, so that's why Miss Marvel continuously is being pushed. I have one more theory, though. I'm wondering if Iman Vellani is part of the reason why Miss Marvel keeps being pushed. Now, Iman Vellani seems like a wonderful person in real life. She is a legitimate comic book fan. She does like Miss Marvel. She really seemed to enjoy playing the character in the Marvels, and she was very mature and cordial when the Marvels didn't do well at the box office, and that is a rare thing to see. So I want to say I really like Iman Vellani, what I've seen of her as a person. But the problem is I still can't get behind Miss Marvel as a character. I'm worried that's what's happening, is that because they want to be nice to Iman and cordial towards her, that is why they're going to continue to try to push this character and continue to try to push her in things that she really shouldn't be. While no offense to Iman Vellani, the problem isn't her, the problem is this character, is that this character just doesn't have anything to her, and she doesn't actually have the popularity or intrigue to fit in things going forward, and she doesn't fit with the X-Men at all, and she shouldn't take a place away from a character that is legitimately popular. So this video is very, very long. I don't know if people even were willing to listen to the whole thing, but I wanted to get it out there, the truth. No, Kamala Khan, Miss Marvel, is not a popular character. I think that they've completely run on the false notion that this character is popular by virtue of people who don't read comics seeing interviews, just constantly spreading the idea that this character is a fan favorite and putting her in so much stuff and assuming that this character must be popular, otherwise they wouldn't put her in so much stuff. No, Marvel fans hate Captain Carter, and there's been criticism towards Luna Snow as industry plants, but if you criticize those characters for being industry plants, you should definitely criticize Kamala Khan. She is the original industry plant, and we don't need to continue to retcon events just to insert her into things when no one likes her. That is all I got for you guys today. What do you think of Miss Marvel? Did I offend any Miss Marvel fans out there by saying this? Do you think that they will ever stop pushing this character? Let me know in the comments below. I have a playlist of short films I'd really like you guys to check out as I'm practicing my filmmaking. And if you want to support my work, you can check out my Patreon page, as these wonderful people have done. And I will see you guys next time with hopefully no more Miss Marvel.